Hello, everybody. My name is Rodrigo Béllo, and it's a great pleasure to have you all here today. But before starting my presentation, I'd like to thank ATBC very much for the opportunity and their wholeheartedly support for arranging and making this virtual presentation possible. So thank you all, and let's get started. All right, so today I'm pleased to present you my master's research project entitled Dispersal and Frugivory in the Brazilian Cerrado. And just to orientate you, we will be following a rather standard structure composed by introduction, methodology, results and discussion, and then conclusion. And afterwards, I'll be much happy to answer your questions. All right, so Dispersal constitute one of the most important links for ecosystems functioning and maintenance, mostly because it does reverberate at almost every ecological level of organization. It has effects, for example, on plants' reproductive cycle and population dynamics, the maintenance and shaping of vegetation structure, sustaining faunal biomass and frugivorous yields. It has impacts on biogeochemical cycles and nutrient cycling, and it also affects the modulation of fire susceptibility and resilience. One of the key elements for seed dispersal is the size of the interacting agents. And that is because large trees commonly have larger seeds, which are better dispersed by medium to large-sized frugivores. So here's just an example. We have the Brazilian tree, jatobá, whose common dispersers include agoutis, macaws, and tapirs, who are large animals capable of eating jatobá's large fruits. However, large-sized animals precisely represent one of the most endangered species groups in the world, facing the pernicious effect of the Anthropocene called defaunation. The functional extinction of large animals from ecosystems may lead to what we know as the empty forest syndrome, which means that not only the species are being vanished, but also their ecological interactions. This is quite concerning because ultimately it may lead to several and unpredictable cascading effects to ecosystems, and we want to avoid that. Therefore, considering those factors, a biome of particular interest to explore seed dispersal interactions and the effects of defaunation is the Brazilian Cerrado. And that is because, first, the Cerrado is one of the largest biodiversity hotspots in the neotropics, being the most biodiverse savanna in the world with high and distinctive levels of endemism and species richness, especially of plants. Additionally, its landscape is composed by different types of vegetation, such as grasslands to savannas and forests altogether. And all of those features combined brings a uniqueness to the plant frugivore mutualisms that we find in the biome. So just so you know, more than 50% of the Cerrado plant species do rely on animals for their dispersal. Secondly, the Cerrado faces several environmental challenges that are jeopardizing its seed dispersal interactions, mostly due to agribusiness expansion and its predatory conversion of intact lands to crops and pastures. And finally, most studies of seed dispersal in the biome are quite anecdotal, and we have scarce information about defaunation, let alone defaunation in the context of seed dispersal for the Cerrado. So, with all of that in mind, I came with three main questions for my research. First, what is the structure of the seed dispersal network in the Cerrado? Second, which are the key species and their respective ecological contributions to this network? And third, how is the defaunation of large-bodied frugivores affecting the network? To answer these questions, I came with a methodology based on three pillars. First, I started by conducting a systematic literature review using the Dispersal framework to extract data about plant frugivore interactions from papers conducted in Cerrado. Then, once this data was gathered, I constructed a binary adjacency matrix of interactions to model the network using bipartite graphs and specific metrics to describe the network, and also some additional secondary data to estimate the seed dispersal potential for the frugivore assemblage. And finally, to assess the effects of defaunation, I calculated the defaunation index and did some statistical analysis comparing the different fruit size categories and their respective dispersers. So, what is the structure of the seed dispersal network in the Cerrado? The Cerrado network is composed by 274 animal species interacting with 193 plant species. From these animal species, more than 65% are birds, followed by roughly 20% of mammals, then less than 1% by reptiles, and almost 14% of ants. Regarding the plant species, the richest taxa were Melastomataceae and Myrtaceae, respectively. In terms of size, the most frequent dispersal interacting in the network were those of low body mass, such as passerines and ants. Regarding the network structure, we have a heterogeneous structure with low nested topology organized around modules, a modular pattern of low connectance. We have 1,565 interaction matches between plants and frugivores in the networks, as you can see here. And now that we know about this network, we chart the key species and their respective ecological contributions. With respect to the frugivores, the species with the highest records of interactions were passerines. So we have here the pale-breasted thrush, the burnished buff tanager, blue dacnys, and the helmet manikin. The plants, in turn, those with the highest records of interactions were mostly pioneer species such as Caesilopia aromatica, Cecropia pakistachia, and Schephrela morototoni. Regarding species network roles, there were two main groups. The first one were hubs, which are composed by species with a disproportionate number of interactions, especially within their own module. And here is represented by Cecropia, blue dacnys, and the helmet manikin. The distinction of a hub could fragmentate the module and brings a lot of cascading effects. And the second group is the connectors, which are species that, connect several different modules in the network. Here represented by South American tapir, the white-eared opossum, and the coati. It's worthy of saying that those animals also got the highest score for the species strength in the network. And extinction of a connector species could shatter the network, isolating the modules and reducing its overall resilience. The frugivore assemblage of the Cerrado shows a moderate potential for effective seed dispersal, which could be explained by its high diversity of species. Different frugivores has different behaviors and features, which can bring to a lot of redundancies, generalizations, and so on and so forth. But also we have to consider that the spatial and temporal variation in the Cerrado. This could affect the potential, so this is just an estimation. And measuring seed dispersal effectiveness is challenging, so we have to find surrogate methods such as this one. The rank we presented here is an alternative, and it's the first attempt to do this at a regional scale for the Cerrado biome. In terms of trends, most interactions in small fruited plants were performed by small birds, with roughly 74% of the interactions. A similar pattern was found for medium fruited plants, where small birds performed around 72% of all interactions. And finally, large fruited plants, most interactions were performed by large birds with almost 30%, followed by mesomammals with roughly 22%. And finally, how is the defaunation of large frugivores affecting the network? To start with, the Cerrado frugivores are likely undergoing moderate defaunation, as shown by the defaunation index of 0.43%. We compared the network assemblage with the expected baseline and found that this is close to what was reported by Bogoni et al. When they assessed the defaunation for the whole new tropics, and in the Cerrado they found something close to 0.5, so it's quite similar. Some caveats, though, should be considered for assessing this index. First is we were based on literature data, which is just a partial representation of reality. Most studies of seed dispersal, they are conducted on historically defaunated areas, and large vertebrates, by rule, they occur in low densities, and it's therefore quite challenging to record their interactions as dispersals. As a proximal indicator of defaunation in the network, we found no overall correlation between fruit diameter and the dispersal's body weight, which is quite surprising because fruits of greater width are usually associated with large frugivores, and in this Cerrado specifically, several large fruited plants exhibit the megafaunal syndrome, which indicates that their main seed dispersals are, or at least should be, large-bodied frugivores, but it wasn't the case. Another thing is that, contrary to expectations, there was no significant difference between dispersals' mean body weight among plant groups. We expected that the average dispersal for large fruited plants would be significantly heavier compared to the other ones. However, this was not observed, probably because of an already detectable downsizing effect in the frugivore assemblage induced by defaunation. And finally, when comparing the assemblage of large-sized frugivores with the actual dispersals of large fruited plants, we saw a low similarity between those two groups, which could mean that large fruited plants are already relying on a greater diversity of dispersals besides, large-bodied frugivores only. And something similar has probably happened in the recent geological past when trees like the pequi, here's one here, used to rely on the dispersal by megafauna species such as the giant ground sloth, and today they rely on macaws, agoutis, and squirrels, for example. And there is already evidence that the large fruited plants can undergo rapid microevolutionary changes to accommodate a wider range of smaller frugivores, and perhaps this is already happening in the Cerrado. And now, just to conclude, the Cerrado seed dispersal network is lightly nested and considerably modular, which confers some resilience to the biome's plant-frugivores interactions. Most of the dispersers in the network, they are generalist species of small to medium size, with opportunistic frugivorous behavior, such as passerines, marsupials, and mesocarnivores. But our large frugivores, like the tapir, they do play a critical role in the network maintenance and functionality. In terms of defaunation, the Cerrado network is already suffering from the effects arising from the defaunation of its largest frugivores, especially when considered large fruited plants who are having fewer interactions with large-bodied species. Information on the network structure and composition is really important to design and implement sound conservation programs for the biome, especially in the context of ecological restoration practices. Further research needs to be addressed because there are still many knowledge shortfalls, but our study represents an initial effort to address these things and offer a big picture of the seed dispersal in the Cerrado, especially in the context of defaunation. There are so many people that I'm grateful for, but I would like to especially thank my supervisors, Dr. Imo Oliveras and Professor Yavin Demali. And I would like to finish my presentation with the following quote: "If you can dream it, you can do it." Thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon.